Hi, I'm Naïma. I make videos about the future of work, tech, what it's like to have your own business, and books. This year I was diagnosed with long COVID and I was told that I would have to cut my work hours by half, so work about 4 hours per day. And the weird thing is, I found this really difficult, and it led me to start wondering and try and reevaluate my relationship to work, because surely working less and trying to achieve the same output, isn't that what we're all kind of working towards? Isn't that the whole point of being productive? Yeah, this led me to start wondering what work means to me. Do I have a healthy relationship to work? Am I attaching too much of myself through work, or is it something that I can reevaluate? So whenever I have a bit of a kind of soul-searching moment, or a moment where I'm trying to understand something a little bit better, I tend to turn to books. So this video will focus on the 3 books that I looked at to try and navigate my relationship to work and evaluate how that relationship could improve. The first book that was really impactful to me during this time was Uviebinené's The Reset. Elizabeth is one of the authors from Slay in Your Lane, which had such huge success a couple of years ago. And this book is a very different vibe. It talks a lot more about the future of work and how work interconnects with the pandemic and our whole relationship to work as well. And there have been a lot of think pieces that talk about how work has changed during this time, and I really think none of them really hit the mark for me until I read this one. This is probably the most substantive book that I've found on the future of work and work in the pandemic. The Reset emphasizes that a lot of the conversation around work talks a lot about the way we work, rather than delving deeply into what work means to us, which is a much more interesting question. And when you really dig into it, whether we're in our home office, in the living room, in the kitchen, or we're at the office, how much has our relationship to work really changed? Uviebinené argues that we've brought the same toxic mindsets and performative aspects into the remote world. This book really sets out to find out, as individuals, how can we change our relationship to work. And what Elizabeth quickly finds out is that it is so interconnected with so many facets of our lives, from identity to culture to society to the way cities work to community. All of these areas are really at the interplay of work, and if you change one thing about the way you work, all of these 6 other facets will also be impacted too. I felt very seen during this book when Uviebinené talks a bit about how we've tied work so much into our identities. When someone asks us who we are and we have to introduce ourselves, we tend to talk about our profession first. And have we reduced this office versus working at home debate into that, because it's much easier to talk about this than about why work forms such an integral part of our identities. And this is exactly what was causing me to spiral when I was having to cut down my hours. The first thought was, how am I going to fill my days? How am I, already bedbound? How am I going to find things to fill up the day? And I'd allowed work to really take up such a large part of my identity. And this book draws on a lot of primary interviews with a wide range of speakers and thought leaders in London and globally. Erica Simon talks about how we should never attach ourselves to a place, a project or a job. Instead, we should attach ourselves to a calling, a purpose, a mission only. And that's the only way we can kind of stay sane in this world where work is so integral to who we are. A lot of this book is around evaluating what work means to us. So it was so easy for us to get wrapped up in the perks of the working environment, being able to chat to your colleagues and friends, being able to go to events at work or meet other people, network and get free lunches or whatever perks your job is offering you. And really, when we were confined to our homes, we were left with the bare bones of our work. There was nowhere to escape. And when you're left with only your work and only your laptop, how fulfilling is the work? And I think we're going to see so many people who try and navigate completely different careers, go back to university. We're already seeing that now, start their own companies, because we really had the time to reflect and time to think about, okay, this is my life and how happy am I, how fulfilled am I? So all in all, I really think The Reset is a very thoughtful book. It leaves a lot of questions unanswered, and I think that's also kind of the beauty of the way that it's written. I hope that this will be a huge conversation starter and that it makes us all reflect on work and how we view work within our lives. I'd be really interested to find out what the author writes next. The next book I turned to while I was in this reflective phase was How Will You Measure Your Life by Christensen. And this book, I think he is kind of a business academic. This book is based on a speech that he wrote when he was diagnosed with cancer. This was obviously a really critical juncture in his life, and it led him to start thinking about his work and his career to date. Christensen emphasizes that when we find ourselves in unhappy careers or unhappy lives, it's usually because we've understood what means a lot to us. When it comes to our work, we often think of hygiene factors like salary, what job title we're going to have, what are the perks, what are the working hours like. But really, we should be looking at motivation factors instead. So, is the work going to be challenging enough? Will I have ownership over this facet of the work? Will I be making an impact? These are all kind of more important questions that we tend to forget. The prevailing message to me from How Will You Measure Your Life was that the small compromises that we make along the way don't seem like much, but over time they do veer us away from the path that we potentially need to be on in order to find meaning in work or life or other facets. I don't know, I recommend this book to a few people. I think a few people would really enjoy and gravitate towards this book, especially people who are in business, who want to understand more about workplace culture and things that are motivating to us as humans. But I think other people would find this book hugely obnoxious because the tone sometimes can seem quite preachy. So yeah, take it as you will. I think for me, I enjoyed it at the time, and it was a good time for me to read that book. Right book, right time, I'd say. The final book that I'm going to talk about in this video is Jeff Goins' The Art of Work. And The Art of Work is about finding your calling and discovering what you're born to do. And I think when we talk about calling, to me, we don't use this word enough, I guess. To me, it really evokes superheroes or some kind of knight in shining armor figure, but it's, I guess in this context, what Goins is alluding to is the notion that all of us as little kids, when we looked and were at our most ambitious, before we'd been beaten down by the world, we all had visions and thought that we were going to make a meaningful impact. And along the way, perhaps as we made compromises, that energy was gone, and this book is about really finding that energy to be able to do something that you truly enjoy. Each chapter tells at least one person's story and is based on a particular theme. Awareness was an interesting one. Goins makes a lot of comments about the fact that we need to be open to look at our lives and see patterns and threads and things that meant a lot to us, and quite often we've got blinkers on and we're too focused on the here and now to take a good view, and it's really hard for us to be balanced when we're thinking about what we want. The first key takeaway that I really enjoyed from this book was overcoming the fear that you just know and acting anyway. And I remember at school always being uncertain about the fact that I didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. My career path wasn't really wrapped up in a neat little bow like doctor, lawyer, or a writer, for example. And I really was interested in so many things that I couldn't have narrowed it down, and I didn't even know that the job I have now existed. And when we hear people saying that they just know, Goins argues that it's really unhelpful, because either it's people who are being too humble to talk about the sacrifices and the work they've had to put in to get to where they are, or they make it seem like it was a neat little path that they carved out, but it wouldn't have happened in such a linear and logical way. That's not how it works. And when we are venturing on a different path, what we really want someone to tell us is, you won't fail, or this will work out in the end. But we need to almost give ourselves that inner confidence to be able to do that. Another key theme that was discussed in this book was the myth of talent. Goins talks a lot about how recent studies have disproven the fact that everyone is born with innate talent. Any level of talent in any facet, of course some people are going to be more gifted than others, but any talent is almost always followed up by hard work and rigorous practice. That means that many of us are much more capable at certain things that we potentially wouldn't even see ourselves doing, and I think it's quite comforting in a way. To master any skill, you have to first choose that skill and make a conscious effort to practice it consistently over and over again, and there will come a point where you think you have reached mastery in that skill, or perhaps you get bored, and at that point that's where it's more important to even more push through and get to that next stage of learning and mastery. And the final point that I really enjoyed in this book was around embracing failure and the pivot. And I think Goins emphasises that too often when we look at successful people, we assume that they succeeded despite their failures, and really we don't think about the fact that they probably got there because of their failures. And every time there is a failure, that is a critical juncture to intervene and inspire, go down a different path, or wonder whether what you were doing wasn't fulfilling anyway. And we need to think of the pivot not as plan B, but as unexpected setbacks that happen, and we need to keep going. And it was actually quite inspiring to have this written down. It's very well written. According to Goins, every calling is marked by a period of insignificance and uncertainty, a period where nothing seems to make sense. And I thought that was beautifully phrased. And these moments where we feel we're in the wilderness, we don't know where we're going or what we're doing, these are the moments where you can take stock and live more intentionally with your life. So yeah, those are the 3 books that really resonated for me during this period. I'm sure I'm not the only one who is having a bit of a period of reevaluation. And please comment down below and let me know what books have really resonated for you during this time when you've been thinking about work, your relationship with work, or at any other time. I'd love to hear what books have been keeping you through this time. Thank you so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe.